Chris Hensley is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA SIPC, investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
The Houston Midtown chapter of the Society for Financial Awareness presents Money Matters with your host, Christopher Hensley.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters on KPFT Houston. I'm Chris Hensley. The time is now 10 a.m., and we have a great show lined up for you today. Are risk takers born or made? Trust your gut or analyze before making a decision. What risks are worth taking and what risks should be left alone? Ask acclaimed science journalist and author Kayt Sukel those questions and more as she blends case studies and hard-hitting science to explore risk-taking in work, play, love, and life. Our guest today is Kayt Sukel, who is a Houstonian, and she is the author of the new book, The Art of Risk. So please stay tuned. Keep listening. Kayt will be joining us very, very shortly to do a deep dive into her new book. But if you are a longtime listener of the show, you know that we always reserve the first few minutes of the show to tell you just a little bit about the Society for Financial Awareness, or SOFA, who we are and what we do. We are the local Houston Midtown chapter of SOFA, or the Society for Financial Awareness. We are a nonprofit 501c3 educational speakers bureau, and our mission is to fight financial illiteracy. We do that by going out to different companies, different organizations, different groups, anywhere people already congregate, and we provide financial education seminars as well as health and wellness workshops. So how does this work, or how does this look? Well, typically a company, a professional association will invite us out to come out, and we'll do maybe a lunch, brown bag lunch and learn type seminar. We'll go in and we'll teach classes around finance, around home ownership, around estate planning, real estate, any topics that fall within the scope of financial literacy, and we'll dive a little bit deeper and tell you a little bit more about that in just a moment. But these are usually around the lunch hour. Sometimes we'll go out in the afternoon. We've even been known to go out to companies in the middle of the night if they have shift workers that work around the clock. We've worked with city governments that have had 911 responders or emergency personnel that they can only have off the clock once a year for safety meetings, and they've attached us to that. So it's really the need of the company. Why would the company have us come out, or why would the organization have us come out? Well, there's a couple different reasons. For one, the topics that we talk about are typically, we call them edutainment, because we like to get people up and out of their seats and focus on financial questions such as budgeting, such as college planning, how to purchase your first home, how to negotiate your first car sale. All of these topics, even how to balance a checkbook, are things that we should have been taught back in high school or even in college, but you just don't see those courses coming out. Super important, very unforgiving mistakes that can happen when you let your finances go astray. Now, a lot of times companies will have the 401k guy or the 403b guy come out and do a talk, a retirement talk, or an investment talk. And what you find is that a lot of times those are just going to be surface dives into either how to log on to the 401k, how to get into the website, maybe a little bit about asset allocation, but you don't see a deep dive into the educational aspect. And that's what SOFA is really, really good at doing, is providing the financial literacy piece. The other reason that companies might have us out is something called 404C. And 404C is an ERISA requirement that states that any company that has an ERISA-sponsored or any organization, any company, organization, association that has a retirement plan in place that's ERISA-sponsored has to have some kind of financial education piece at least once a year. So SOFA does help fulfill that, and it is all pro bono. So all of the talks that we give, there's no cost. These are done by experts in their field. I'm a financial advisor. I go out and talk about retirement planning, how to get out of debt, investments, but you might want somebody to come out and talk about wills or estate planning. We have an attorney who is a member here locally who volunteers his time to go out and give wills and estate planning talks. If you wanted somebody to come out and talk about first-time home purchases, that's going to be a realtor. Even financial wellness there's a direct correlation with health and wellness, and so we have a stress in the workplace talk that can be done by a healthcare professional. To find out more about SOFA, you can visit our local website at www.houstonmidtownsofa.org. If you are listening outside of the Houston or Gulf Coast region and you would like to have a speaker come to your city or state, you can reach out to our national office at www.sofausa.org. And with that, let's go ahead and get our guest on the line here.
Hello.
Are you there? Can you hear me?
I can.
Kate, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Well, absolutely. Well, I always start the show kind of the same way. I always like to share a little bit of your bio with listeners to get to know you. Now, you earned your BS in Cognitive Psychology from Carnegie Mellon University and an MS in Engineering Psychology from Georgia Institute of Technology. You're an acclaimed science journalist and author, and you also live here in Houston.
That is correct.
Great. Well, if you could maybe share a little bit something about yourself that might not have been covered in the bio, just to let listeners get to know you just a little bit better.
Sure. I'm an avid traveler. I'm a mom of two fourth, soon-to-be fifth graders. Probably the thing that shocks people the most is I am the PTO treasurer of our local elementary school.
Oh, wow, okay.
So, I'm chock full of excitement over here.
That keeps you busy without, and you're an author, and you've got all of this, so that's a lot of stuff going on. Well, let's dive right into it, because I know when I called you before the show, I have a whole slew of questions that I want to ask you about your new book, The Art of Risk, The New Science of Courage, Caution, and Change. This is out by National Geographic Books. And so I definitely want to ask you questions about the new book there. But we are, as a live radio show, we have headlines that come up on a daily basis, and we just happen to be the morning after the Brexit stuff happened in England yesterday. So I thought maybe we could start with that.
Right.
And kind of get your take on Brexit and maybe how risk is involved in there.
Sure. That I talk about quite a bit in the book is of the ways that emotion can sway decision-making. And this is, of course, especially important when you're talking about risky decisions because of the fact that, these are kind of the decisions that tend to be more emotional. They tend to be, stressful, or maybe you're angry or super happy or what have you. And so where I think Brexit is really fascinating, and not unlike the lead up to the election in the U.S. right now, is that it was a very, very emotional campaign. People worked very hard to rile people up, get them angry, get them afraid. And, in fact, you see that continuing this morning. I mean, what's interesting is that it was a shocking vote. We do see the markets dropping already, but it is a non-binding agreement. It still has to pass Parliament. And yet people this morning are already talking about how it's the end of the world, instead of taking a step back and saying, okay, this has happened, what comes next, and what do we really need to do about it? So I think it's really important, from one hand, just how much I think that we're unaware that emotion changes the way that we view risky decisions. It makes us focus on different variables than we would otherwise. And why it's so important, I think, in politics to, take really a long, hard look beyond the sound bites and, of course, these very dapper and often I don't know if they're funny, like haha, or funny train wreck sometimes, politicians, but, getting things that rile us up or either make us angry at them or the world or society, and really do our research into what should be done for the betterment of our communities and the betterment of our countries.
Absolutely. I know I have some questions around the election as far as how that's going to, how that plays into it. But one of the things is you talk about the amygdala overtaking your risk circuitry. Can you maybe tie that into the election season?
Sure. So I would say it's very similar. So Brexit, the Leave the EU campaign was really sort of, pushed this with this idea that if, Britain leaves the EU, there'll be more jobs, especially for sort of blue-collar workers in the UK. It sort of, really pressed on fears about immigration and what that was doing to the economy, and really kind of tried to fire up people and make them angry. And we have a very similar rhetoric here in the U.S. right now. Here in Houston, I'm sort of surprised that, I was really actually happy that the Houston Chronicle came out and said, hey, Donald Trump, no thanks on that whole we hate Mexicans front. But a lot of the country, really does blame immigration and our neighbors. And, I happen to be from a part Mexican family, and doesn't see the danger of rhetoric like, Mexicans are murderers and rapists. And, how that gets people really riled up. So instead of looking at what the real problems are in the economy, instead of taking a logical, rational approach to how we can fix them, we find a scapegoat. We just say that name louder and louder. And all of a sudden people are voting with anger and emotion instead of often common sense. Unfortunately, no matter how we change our immigration policies, that's not going to change a lot about how the economy is changing, how it's, things are becoming more computerized, how so much of manufacturing and those kind of things are leaving the country. That probably won't change. So what can we do better? What can we really work on? Who has policies that can help, bring income inequalities, make them less divided and we're not even having that conversation because we're so worried about the crazy sound bites that are playing on CNN. So that's, I think, the danger. The other danger is we're so focused on the presidential election right now, we're not really looking hard enough at our local candidates. And, while having a president that we, represents our values is important, it's much more important that we have the people that represent our values and our goals at the local level, because those are the people that really have the power to shape our local communities.
Absolutely. So you said quite a few things there. It's great having somebody from Houston here because I'm also half Hispanic, and so that when the Houston Chronicle came out, I was very proud of them for doing that. So you mentioned that right at the beginning, but some of the things you talked about were the ideas of scapegoating during elections, where we have these bigger problems that are there, and things like these stressful emotions being kind of triggered so that people make these decisions without necessarily looking at the bigger picture, taking everything into consideration. You talked about the amygdala. I've always heard that about, one example they talk about when Mike Tyson bit that guy's ear off.
Oh, yeah. Holyfield, right?
Yes. So for people who aren't really familiar with the amygdala, can you talk to us about maybe kind of the neuroscience behind that?
So the amygdala is part of the brain. It is one of the evolutionarily oldest, most conserved parts of the brain. And a lot of people talk about it as being the seat of the fight or flight response. So this is really something that governs fear. Other researchers say that it sort of represents the 4Fs. And, of course, fight and flight, feeding is another one. And, of course, the last F is for reproduction. So, you have basically, these really basic sort of instincts. And it gets, hyped up very, very fast. And it really does sort of overwhelm the entire system. And you can understand why it does that. If you're in the middle of the woods and a bear is coming at you, you need the amygdala to say, hey, buddy, either get your gun out or get running or else you're going to die. But in day-to-day society now, it's not necessarily a bear coming at you. It may be your neighbor yelling at you for your grass not being cut short enough, or it may be, bill collectors calling your home even after you've asked them to stop calling. And you can still have that very overwhelming sort of takeover response. And it's not really a reasonable one. It really is one of sort of emotion. And when that kind of fear takes over, the problem is it takes a lot out of you. And again, you're really only focusing on the variables of a risky decision, for survival. So, the thing is, no matter who gets elected come November, we're all going to survive, as much as, we may cry and stomp our feet and say, we're going to move to Europe, or maybe not anymore after Brexit, but, we're going to survive. It's not really a fight or flight kind of decision. And yet, so many of these campaign commercials, the rhetoric, the anger, the fear-mongering, it gets those systems going, and it can really overwhelm good decision-making.
Well, that's a very good point. That's something that you've talked about in the past, is negative campaigning. How does risk play into the whole negative campaigning thing?
Well, I think what it comes down to is a risk, from my perspective, is actually an educated and prepared decision. There is an uncertain outcome, but you've done your homework and you're prepared, and you're in a good position. A gamble is a fly by the seat of your pants, throw your money down on the table wherever it lands kind of decision. And again, the thing about when you're talking about fear-mongering, when you're talking about negative campaigning, that's all you're focused on. If it's all about Hillary's emails, how can you really look at, okay, what is Hillary actually going to do in the next 4 years to help get the country where I want it to be? If all you're listening to is, Trump saying we're going to win, 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 again, you may not be paying attention to what his economic policies really are, what he, plans to do, with the evangelical vote, who he might put in position in Supreme Court, slots. So I think that's the problem. When it's all about anger and loss and hype, that's all you're paying attention to. You're not looking at policy. You're not looking at planning. You're not looking at long-term goals. And you're certainly not looking beyond what happens once you cast your ballot in November. And that's the thing. And this is what I hope that people remember about, the election process, is that your job isn't done when you cast your vote. If you really want to make a difference, there is plenty of opportunity to do so at the local level. Even if you don't want to run for office yourself, make sure to support the people that you put in office. Let them know what's important to you in the community. Right now, call your congressman if you think they're doing a good job, not just when you think they're, really messing it up. Get involved, play a role, keep going, and then, you don't have to vote by or act just on fear. You can, act on an educated, prepared, basis where you really have a better idea where you're going, and you won't be misdirected so much by those negative campaigns and those negative feelings.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned acting locally, and I would be at a loss if I forgot to mention this, because that's such a good lead-in for currently, right now, KPFT is a community-based radio station, and so we are having a run for the board of directors right now, and so we are encouraging, and that board of directors is made up by listeners, and since we're community-based radio, that is everybody who is in the listening range. We've got quite a few seats to fill for the board here, and so I just wanted to throw that in. Getting back into the national election, though, one of the things you talk about is risk circuitry, and why your risk circuitry may be pushing you to vote for one candidate or the other. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, any decision is governed by a really sophisticated circuit in the brain. And it involves sort of these lower level, some people call it the reptilian brain, but motivational areas. So it's called the basal ganglia, and it's the stuff that wants to go after rewards. So money, sex, prestige, all the good stuff in life, chocolate cake. These are the areas of the brain that wants you to go forth and grab those rewards. But, of course, if each and every one of us went after all the things that we wanted in the exact moment we wanted them, the world would be a pretty inhospitable place. We would not be able to call ourselves very civilized. So the brain also has a very highly developed structure. It's called prefrontal cortex. It's right behind your forehead. And it sort of acts as a brake. It tells those lower-level brain areas, if not no, at least not right now, and helps us, basically put ourselves in check when we need to be put in check. Sex is great, but not with your boss's wife. Chocolate cake is awesome, but not for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day of the week. It helps us put some control on things. So any risky decision really is going to be kind of a dance between the gas, those motivational areas, and the brakes, the prefrontal cortex. But what you also find is that there are other areas of the brain that feed into the circuit and provide information. You can say they're adding sort of extra variables that determine whether the gas or the brakes are going to take hold. So one of those is, like you said, the amygdala. Sort of these very evolutionarily old areas of the brain that are looking out for survival. Because sometimes you don't, if that bear is coming down at you or a truck on the highway or what have you, you don't want to overthink it. You need to get out of the way. But you also have memory. You have the emotional areas of the brain. You have places like the insula, which give you gut feelings. And so this is also feeding information into this circuit. And it helps you better determine, and with good experience, when it will work in your favor to hit that gas and go after the things you want, and when it's better off to hit the brakes and sort of hold back.
Well, this is so. We are speaking right now with Kayt Sukel. She is the author of the new book, The Art of Risk, The New Science of Courage, Caution, and Change. You also talk about, in the book, you've mentioned Trump, or you've talked in the past about Trump's aversion to stated positions. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So it's interesting to me. And it's funny because I think a lot of people really applaud him for this. They say, well, he doesn't know what he's going to do as president yet, and that's such a good thing. And, while I don't think that he needs to box himself in and say, well, if this happens, here's my 16-point plan of response, what I think he is sort of doing is not we're not getting a feel for his values. I mean, outside of he wants to win. And so, what does that mean? So if it's about, a judge who he thinks may be biased because of his ethnic background, that shows us a lot about his character and maybe what kind of president he can be. But how is he going to negotiate with other world leaders? How is he going to do his job if he doesn't state a position? So on one hand, I think it's an interesting gamble that he's making, and certainly some people really applaud him for it. Well, he doesn't know what he's going to do yet until he gets in that situation. Why you want to hamstring him? But for me, I think that it's not a risk. It's not a smart risk. It's a gamble because it really does make it so we don't know, what his true values are and what he's really going to represent. If he's that changeable, then it seems like the only thing that motivates him is self-interest, and that concerns me, no matter how good his economic chops may or may not be.
Absolutely, and I think whether it's Trump or any candidate, when you hear people say a lack of a platform, and it's really when you talk about risk now or in the future, at some point when issues come up, you have to have some kind of position or plan on it. So either we get to see it now or we get to see it when it comes up as needed, which is probably not the best time to see it if we're trying to make an intelligent decision.
Well, and I think you really do need to have some of that background in place. One of the things in the book is I didn't just look to scientists. I also interviewed about a dozen really successful risk takers from all walks of life. There's Steph Davis, who's a renowned free solo climber and base jumper, Andy Frankenberger, who's a two-time World Series of Poker champion, David Baskin, who is just a world-famous neurosurgeon, and he's actually here in Houston, fabulous guy. So, and it really amazed me that all of them are such thoughtful, considerate people. And that's because they are sort of planners. They really know their stuff. And so they can think of all the possible contingencies. So, if you went in for a consult with Dr. Baskin, he's not going to say, okay, this is exactly the way that I'm going to remove your brain tumor. Of course, it doesn't work like that because you don't, know what may or may not happen yet. But he knows if this happens, I'm going to go this way. And if this happens, I can do this to stop the bleeding. And this happens, he's always thinking 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of the game to make sure that he gets you to the outcome that you want. And I think that's the problem. It's not that we want, a 16-point referendum on what Trump's going to do, but we need to understand what his actual end goal would be, in dealing with some of these situations, and that isn't even being stated.
Absolutely. Now, we are in the middle. We've had the Brexit stuff this morning. We're in the middle of an election year, so we're definitely, politics is relevant. But the book is not just about politics. We talk about, you talk about risk in many different things. One of the things you talk about is, for instance, just traveling abroad right now.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So, I'm an avid traveler. I always have been. My parents, my dad was actually lived most of his life down here in the Houston area because he worked in international mining and refining. And so even when we were little, he was taking us all over the world. And, the travel bug stuck. And the thing that I hear time and time again, and now I still travel. I take my kids with me. My son, I think, has now been to about 50 countries, and he's 11. But people are always saying, aren't you scared? How could you do that? The thing that I have to say is, this week, some of this stuff seems not as important anymore because you can see that even danger can happen in Orlando with an alligator. I mean, or, in a nightclub. And these things seem so senseless, but they're not limited to anywhere else. But you need to think about risk the right way. And so often we don't think about the risk that's right outside our front door. I think it's much more dangerous to get in the car and drive my kids on the interstate sometimes than it would be to, say, travel around Europe. And the other side of that coin is if I did try to protect them from those possible risks, one, I'm letting the terrorists win, which I'm not for that. But the other part, I'm shielding them from what I think are very important life lessons. I think it's so important to go explore the world so you can learn that people are more alike than not. I think it's important to explore the world to see that not everybody lives in a suburban split level, with a truck and a sedan in the front yard or in their driveway. I think it's important to learn about different economies and how people, survive and yet still find so much joy and worth in living day to day. I think so much of the xenophobia and just a lot of the bigotry that we see in these elections are because people are afraid to travel. Even outside Texas. One of my neighbors just told me the other day he doesn't see any reason to leave Texas. And while I applaud his, Texan pride, I don't think that he's going to lose any of it if he decides to step foot over into Kansas.
Absolutely. What a great message. I agree wholeheartedly with what you've just said there. And we are bumping towards the end of the show, so I want to make sure to talk about, there's something going on called Summer of Risk. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, the book came out in March, and as I've been traveling around talking about it, what's been great, the thing about risk-taking, it doesn't have to be, quitting your job to travel the world for a year or jumping out of airplanes or drag racing. Really, what, embracing risk are the little things in life. And, that's sort of the point of the book. And as people have come up to me, they've been telling me, your book inspired me to finally book that trip. It's inspired me to ask to take the lead on this big project at work. One woman came up, she said, it's inspired me to start knitting with the expensive yarn. I've always been afraid I'd mess it up, but now I'm going to give it a try. So it's really these little things, embracing smart, seasoned risk-taking. So National Geographic Books and I partnered for this Summer of Risk selfie campaign. All you have to do is take a picture of yourself about to embark on a smart, considered risk this summer. Just tag it with hashtag Summer of Risk in your location, and share how you're planning to use risk to reach your long-term goal, whatever it may be. National Geographic Books is going to share some of their favorite pictures on its Facebook page, and 5 lucky participants will actually win a National Geographic Books Summer Reads prize pack. So I would love to see your Summer of Risk selfie put up. Just a picture of you pushing the edge a little bit, getting a little bit outside your comfort zone to either find a little bit more success or wonder or just some plain old-fashioned fun.
Absolutely. Well, we're right here towards the end of the show. The book is The Art of Risk. Kayt, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
For listeners who'd like to find out more about Kayt, you can visit her website at www.kaytsukel.com. And for listeners of the podcast, you'll find a link to the website as well as a link to the book on Amazon. And Kayt, do you have any parting thoughts you might want to leave us with today?
I just, we make risk bigger and scarier than it has to be. It really is part and parcel of every decision you'll make every single day. And so I think it pays to learn how to better harness it so you can reach all the things that you want to reach, make all those goals happen.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Money Matters Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, visit us on the web at www.moneymatterspodcast.com. Drop us a line on SpeakPipe on the right-hand corner. It will receive any voicemails, questions, thoughts, concerns that you have about the show. In addition to this, we recently launched a Patreon campaign. Click on the Donate Now tab to hit the tip jar and find out what Patreon's campaign is all about.